Good morning. I grew up with and am still growing up with a love for words. And gosh, I remember around my house growing up, words were a pretty big deal. Literature everywhere. My mother was an English teacher. She would always have different intellectual folks coming over, and at times it was almost around our dinner table. It was almost like there would be battles of words, and they were nuggets that I grew to love. Through reading, I read like crazy. Through poetry, I wrote poetry. As a songwriter, words have just been a big part of my life. And I want to talk about an aspect of words this morning. And so I brought that into my walk with the Lord as I study my Bible and do word studies, of course. But there's an area of a word study that I want to talk about this morning, which is the etymology of a word, and real nuggets of revelation can be gleaned from the etymology of a word. And what that means, etymology, is a big word for it. The origin, I think, is the best way to probably describe it. The origin of a word, and to me, it paints a picture of where the word came from. And when I use it, that picture can be in my mind. A picture's worth 1,000 words, they say. So sorry about that. Couldn't help myself. But the etymology of a word, the origin of a word. So this morning, the word I want to talk about is steadfast, which we find all through Scripture to describe our stance and our posture as we go through trials and various trials, as we struggles and fights, the pain of life. And it's also used to describe God's love for us, his steadfast love for us, that we would remain steadfast in trials. Those two applications, it's used all through Scripture. For example, here I'm going to use just a couple of these. So in James 1, we're all pretty familiar with this scripture. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Then we jump down to verse 12. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. Paul encourages Timothy to stay steadfast in the faith. To all through Paul's letters and the letters of the apostles, to be steadfast in our walk with the Lord. And then, of course, the psalmist says, "My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing. Yes, I will sing praises." Isaiah that says, "The steadfast of mind you will keep in perfect peace, because he trusts in you." The Lord's mercy, the Lord's steadfast love, which is in numerous scriptures, but here's one. I will recount the steadfast love of the Lord, the praises of the Lord, according to all that the Lord has granted us. I will recount the steadfast love of the Lord. So the etymology of that word steadfast is really cool, guys. It comes from two words: steed, for horse, and fast, which is a nautical term for taking a line and making it and stopping it, tying it off to where it can't move. So horse and a line, or if we fast from food, we stop eating. So fast means to stop in this context. It means to stop something. So we stop a line right where it's at. We stop eating, and then steed for horse. It's an old English word for horse. And where it comes from is back in days of early warfare, when generals directed battle from a high place mounted on a horse. They had to have horses that would remain calm during the battle. And the way they achieved this was they would take horses and train them by all the clamor, the noises of battles, cannon fire, if that was the case, swords, shields, screaming, hollering, all those things. And they would do it right in the horse's ear, and literally right in their ear. And most horses bolted, which is the natural inclination of a horse. But the horse that could stand fast qualified to be a general's horse. So to be steadfast. So the picture that I draw from that, to be steadfast, when the battle's going off in my ear, I'm surrounded by the battle. It's loud. It's unceasing. I just stand. What is it? When having done all you can do, Paul says, when having done all you can do, stand. That's a good picture of that too. So this idea of standing, being immovable in battle is the etymology and the picture that comes from this word steadfast. So it describes not only that, but it also describes the way we're able to do that, which is because of God's steadfast, his unmovable, unshakable, with love for us. And so there's one more scripture that I love in this context, and it's Hebrews 6:19. This hope we have is an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil. And so this hope we have, our hope is an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, unmovable, unshakable. No amount of battle or warfare can shake that, and one which enters within the veil, into the presence of God. So here I hadn't planned on this, but I was a merchant marine. I joined the merchant marine when I was 18 years old, and for 12 years sailed as a merchant marine all over the world. And there were times when it would be too rough to enter port, or it'd be too rough to sail, and we would have to drop anchor lest the ship or boat be in danger. And when we did that, someone had to sit up in the wheelhouse, which is where you steer the ship from, and watch. We had radar, so we would have radars with distances to make sure and watch the radar 24 hours a day. All times your eyes had to be on the radar or on a landmark that would show you whether the boat were drifting. And if it were drifting, the anchor meant the anchor was dragging, and you could wind up on the rocks, and that would not be good. So when I read this scripture, I thought about that in context, in relationship to being steadfast. That as we watch that anchor, the hope we have as an anchor of the soul. So I watch when I'm in the midst of the battle. It's going off all around me, warfare. Then it's a time to be vigilant. It's a time to be vigilant on my anchor. Make sure it's not moving, and that anchor is my hope, both sure and steadfast, and one which enters into the veil, brings me into the presence of God. His everlasting, his steadfast love sees me through that. So that is the etymology of a very cool word that pops up often in the Bibles. And if you heard something in the background, that was my dog making dog noises. So thank you very much, and have an awesome day, guys.